If a man must take a bride to hold his land, does marriage begin in love or in law? The morning sun caught the brass buckle on Samuel Garrett's work belt as he counted fence posts along the north pasture. 27 cedar posts stood firm, but the 28th leaned like a drunk cowpoke against the morning wind. Watermarks on the wood told of spring floods that had shifted the ground beneath. He pulled the leather pouch from his vest pocket, his grandfather's tobacco pouch, though Samuel had never taken to smoking. Inside, wrapped in oiled cloth, lay the deed to his 160 acres. The paper bore water stains from the crossing 3 years back, but the ink held true. Land meant everything out here, 40 miles south of Pueblo, where the Arkansas River carved its stubborn path through Colorado territory. The sound reached him before the sight, a rumble like distant thunder, but the sky showed clear blue. Samuel shaded his eyes and looked upstream toward the canyon mouth. A wall of brown water, thick as coffee with cream, rolled between the cottonwoods. Flash flood from the high country, maybe from storms he couldn't see. Then he spotted the wagon. A buckboard fought the current near the far bank, its wheels spinning uselessly as the water lifted and dropped it like a cork. A woman in dark calico gripped the seat with both hands, her bonnet torn loose and floating downstream. The team of horses thrashed in their traces, wild-eyed and screaming. Samuel didn't think. He spurred his mare toward the water's edge, coiling his rope as he rode. The current would sweep the wagon downstream in minutes past his land, past any chance of rescue, toward the rapids where the river narrowed between stone walls. "Hold fast," he called, though the roar swallowed his words. He built a loop and sent it sailing toward the woman. The hemp fell short by 10 feet. The water rose higher, lapping at the wagon bed. Samuel backed his mare upstream, giving himself more angle, and threw again. This time the loop settled around the woman's shoulders. "Slip it under your arms." She understood, working quickly despite the wagon's pitching. Samuel dallied the rope around his saddle horn and urged his mare backward, step by careful step. The current fought him. 60 pounds of pressure on the line, but his mare had good feet and a steady heart. The rope went taut. The woman let go of the wagon seat and slid into the churning water, the line her only anchor against the flood's pull. Samuel's mare strained, hooves cutting divots in the muddy bank, until the woman's boots found purchase in the shallows. She stumbled forward, water streaming from her skirts, and collapsed on solid ground 20 yards from the river's normal course. The wagon tumbled away downstream, the horses breaking free just before it shattered against a fallen cottonwood. Samuel dismounted and knelt beside her. She was young, maybe 22 or 23, with brown hair plastered dark against her skull. Her dress was good wool, not the rough cotton most settler women wore. City-made, with pearl buttons and careful stitching. "You hurt, miss." She shook her head, then tried to speak, and coughed up river water instead. "Easy now. You're safe." When she could finally draw breath, she looked up at him with grey eyes that held more intelligence than fear. "My trunk," she said. "All my things were in that wagon. Things can be replaced. You can't." She sat up, wringing water from her skirts. "I was to meet the stage at Bent Creek. There's a man waiting for me there, Mr. Jonathan Reese. We're to be married next Sunday." Samuel felt something twist in his chest. Of course she was spoken for. A woman like this wouldn't travel alone unless she had good reason and a safe destination. "I'll get you to Bent Creek," he said. "Town's only 12 miles north. We can make it before evening." She looked at her sodden dress, then at the empty space where the wagon had been. "I have nothing now. No dowry, no wedding dress, nothing but what I'm wearing." Mr. Reese will understand. Any man worth marrying would. But as Samuel helped her to her feet, he wondered if Jonathan Reese was that kind of man. And he wondered why the thought of her marrying someone else sat in his stomach like a stone. The ride to Bent Creek took 4 hours, with the woman, Miss Catherine Walsh, riding double behind Samuel's saddle. She proved a good traveller, never complaining about the pace or the rough ground, though he felt her shiver when the afternoon wind picked up. They reached the settlement just as the sun touched the western hills. Bent Creek sprawled along the stage route like scattered dominoes. A general store, a saloon, a boarding house, and not much else. The stage stood empty in front of Milliken's store, its team already changed, and the driver nowhere in sight. The stage left already? Catherine's voice held a note of panic. Samuel checked his pocket watch. A railroad. Waltham, his father, had left him. 4:30. Denver stage runs at 4 sharp. They found Jonathan Reese in the saloon, a soft-built man in a store-bought suit, nursing his 3rd whiskey of the afternoon. When Catherine walked in, still damp and bedraggled, he looked her up and down like a buyer examining damaged goods. "You missed the stage," he said, without getting up from his chair. "There was a flood. I lost everything." "Everything?" Reese's eyes went cold. "The trunk with your father's settlement? The household linens? The silver service?" Samuel watched Catherine's face crumple. "It's all gone. But I'm here, Jonathan. I'm safe and ready to marry you as we planned." Reese drained his whiskey and stood. "Without a dowry?" "Miss Walsh, I'm a businessman. This marriage was an arrangement between your father and me, $200 cash, plus household goods worth another 100. You've brought me nothing but soggy calico." The saloon went quiet. Even the bartender stopped wiping glasses. Catherine held her head high. "I can work. I can keep house, cook, sew. I can hire a Mexican girl for $8 a month to do all that," Reese said. "I don't need a wife who costs me money instead of bringing it." Samuel stepped forward, his hand resting on the tobacco pouch in his vest. "Mister, you might want to reconsider that position." "And you are?" "Samuel Garrett. I pulled Miss Walsh from the flood." Reese laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "The hero wants his reward, is that it? Well, you can have her. I'm catching tomorrow's stage back to Denver." The silence stretched like a held breath. Catherine stood between the two men, her grey eyes bright with unshed tears, and something else, something that looked like relief. "I'll find my own way," she said quietly. "Thank you for your honesty, Mr. Reese. It saves us both a great deal of trouble." She turned toward the door, but Samuel caught her elbow gently. "Miss Walsh, you'll need a place to stay tonight. The boarding house is decent, and Mrs. Carver keeps a clean kitchen. I have no money for a room." Samuel pulled $2 silver from his pocket and pressed them into her palm. "Consider it wages. You can help me with the books tomorrow. I need someone who can cipher properly." It wasn't entirely true, but it wasn't entirely false either. His ranch accounts could use a woman's careful hand. Catherine looked at the coins, then at Samuel's weathered face. "Why are you being kind to me?" "Maybe because someone should be." As they walked toward Mrs. Carver's boarding house, Samuel felt the weight of his grandfather's tobacco pouch against his chest. Inside, along with the deed to his land, lay a letter from the Territorial Council, a summons that had arrived just last week. Tomorrow morning, he was to appear before the council to answer questions about his eligibility for expanded land grants. The government wanted to know if Samuel Garrett was the kind of man who could build a proper homestead, raise a family, contribute to the civilized development of Colorado Territory. They wanted to know if he had prospects for marriage. Dawn came grey and cold, with the smell of snow in the high country. Samuel stood in front of the territorial building, adjusting his best string tie and checking his pocket watch. 8 o'clock sharp, the letter had said. The council chamber held 5 men behind a polished oak-tabled territorial officials with their papers and seals and careful questions. Samuel recognized Judge Morrison from Pueblo, Territory Commissioner Hayes, and 3 others whose names he didn't know but whose authority he couldn't question. "Mr. Garrett," Judge Morrison began, "you've applied for an additional quarter section under the Expanded Homestead Act. The grant requires proof of your intention to improve the land for agricultural use and establish a proper family residence." "Yes, sir." Commissioner Hayes shuffled through his papers. "You're 31 years old, unmarried, with no immediate family. The territory is particularly interested in settlers who can contribute to population growth and community stability." Samuel nodded. He'd expected this question. "Are you engaged to be married, Mr. Garrett?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Samuel thought of Catherine Walsh, probably waking up in Mrs. Carver's boarding house about now, wondering what she would do with her life. He thought of Jonathan Reese, counting his money in a Denver hotel. He thought of his 160 acres, good land that could support a family if a man worked it right. "I am considering marriage." "Yes, sir." "Considering?" Judge Morrison leaned forward. "Mr. Garrett, we need more than consideration. We need commitment. The expanded grants are limited, and we must award them to men who will build lasting communities." Commissioner Hayes nodded. "If you were to marry within, say, the next month, your application would receive much more favorable consideration." Samuel felt the tobacco pouch against his chest, heavy as a millstone. Inside, the deed to his current land represented 3 years of back-breaking work. The letter from Catherine's father, which she didn't know he'd found floating downstream, offered a different kind of weight. Dr. Edmund Walsh of Street, Louis, requesting Jonathan Reese's guarantee of his daughter's well-being, along with a bank draft for $200 that the flood had rendered unreadable but not worthless. The bank in Pueblo might honor it with the right endorsement. "Gentlemen," Samuel said carefully, "if I were to marry a woman of good character and education, someone who could contribute to the community's development, would that satisfy the territory's requirements?" "Absolutely," Judge Morrison said. "Do you have such a woman in mind?" Samuel thought of Catherine's grey eyes, her quiet courage in the face of Jonathan Reese's cruelty, the way she'd helped Mrs. Carver serve breakfast that morning without being asked. "I believe I do." The knock on Samuel's door came at sunset, 3 days after his meeting with the Territorial Council. He opened it to find Catherine Walsh standing on his porch, wearing a borrowed dress from Mrs. Carver and carrying a small bundle wrapped in brown paper. "Miss Walsh, this is unexpected. I've been thinking about your offer," she said. "The bookkeeping work." Samuel stepped aside to let her in. His cabin was clean but sparse. A kitchen table he'd built himself, 2 chairs, a stone fireplace, shelves lined with ledgers and farming journals. The tobacco pouch sat on the mantel, next to his father's railroad watch. "There's something I need to tell you," Catherine said, settling into one of the chairs, "about my father and why I came west." Samuel poured coffee from the pot on the stove and waited. "My father is Dr. Edmund Walsh. He runs a surgery in Street, Louis, and he's a good man, but he's also a practical one. When my mother died last year, he decided I needed a husband who could provide security." She wrapped her hands around the coffee cup. Jonathan Reese seemed suitable. He had money, a business, good references. But my father didn't know what kind of man Mr. Reese really was, and I was too frightened of being alone to ask the right questions. She met Samuel's eyes. I'm not frightened anymore. Samuel reached for the tobacco pouch on the mantel and opened it carefully. Inside, along with his deed, lay the water-stained letter he'd retrieved from the river. This belonged to you, he said, handing it to Catherine. She unfolded the paper, squinting at the smeared ink. How did you? Found it caught in the cottonwoods downstream. Your father's letter to Reese, along with a bank draft. Catherine read silently, her face growing pale. $200. He was paying Jonathan to marry me. Your father loves you, Samuel said. Men do foolish things when they're trying to protect people they care about. Catherine set the letter on the table. The bank draft is ruined. Maybe not. I know the banker in Pueblo. He's an honest man. They sat in silence, watching the fire burn low in the grate. Outside, a coyote called from the hills, answered by another from the valley. Mr. Garrett, Catherine said finally, what exactly are you proposing? Samuel felt heat rise in his neck. I'm not sure I follow. The bookkeeping work is real, isn't it? But there's something else you need. He should have known she was too intelligent to fool. The Territorial Council wants me married. It's a condition for expanded land grants. And you need a wife. I need a partner, Samuel corrected. Someone who can help build something lasting out here. Catherine smiled for the first time since he'd pulled her from the flood. That's the first honest proposal I've received. I'm proposing? Aren't you? Samuel looked at the woman sitting across from his kitchen table. Her borrowed dress, neat despite its worn patches, her grey eyes steady and unafraid. He thought about his empty cabin, his 160 acres of good land, the future he wanted to build but couldn't manage alone. Miss Walsh, he said formally, would you consider marrying me? Under what terms? The question surprised him. Terms? I won't be bought, Mr. Garrett, and I won't be treated as property. If we marry, it will be as equal partners. I'll keep your books, help with the ranch work, contribute what I can to our household. But I'll also speak my mind, make my own decisions about how to spend my time, and expect to be consulted on matters that affect our future. Samuel extended his hand across the table. Equal partners. Catherine shook it, her grip firm and warm. Equal partners. There's one more thing, Samuel said, reaching again for the tobacco pouch. The council wants proof of commitment. We'd need to marry within the month. How long have we known each other? 4 days. And you're willing to bind your life to a woman you've known for 4 days? Samuel considered the question seriously. I've known plenty of people for years who turned out to be strangers. Sometimes 4 days of truth is worth more than 4 years of pretense. Catherine nodded. When shall we marry? Sunday. Give folks time to talk if they want to, but not so much time they can think up objections. Sunday, then. Catherine stood and smoothed her skirts. I should return to Mrs. Carver's and begin preparing. Catherine. The name felt natural on his tongue. Are you certain about this? She paused at the door, looking back at him. Mr. Garrett, 3 days ago I thought my life was over. You've given me a chance to build something new. I don't know if we'll love each other, but I believe we can respect each other. For now, that feels like enough. After she left, Samuel sat alone in his cabin, turning the tobacco pouch over in his hands. His grandfather had carried it through 2 wars and 40 years of farming. Inside, Along with the deed to Samuel's land and Catherine's father's letter, lay one more document, his mother's wedding ring, wrapped in a scrap of blue silk. Sunday was 3 days away. The wedding took place at the Bent Creek schoolhouse, with Judge Morrison performing the ceremony and half the territory watching from wooden benches. Catherine wore Mrs. Carver's best dress, altered to fit her slender frame, and carried a bouquet of late wildflowers Samuel had picked that morning. When the judge asked for the ring, Samuel produced his mother's gold band from the tobacco pouch. It fit Catherine's finger as if it had been made for her. "Do you, Samuel Garrett, take Catherine Walsh to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." "Do you, Catherine Walsh, take Samuel Garrett to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Catherine's voice was clear and steady. "I do. By the authority vested in me by Colorado Territory, I pronounce you husband and wife." The kiss was brief, formal, witnessed by 36 neighbors and the territorial officials. But when Samuel stepped back, Catherine's grey eyes held something new. Not love, perhaps, but the beginning of trust. Commissioner Hayes approached them after the ceremony, carrying an official envelope sealed with red wax. "Mr. Garrett, Mrs. Garrett," he said with a slight bow, "the Territorial Council has approved your application for expanded land grants. An additional quarter section, contingent upon proof of agricultural improvement within 2 years." Samuel accepted the envelope, feeling its weight. Inside lay the future 320 acres of Colorado Territory, enough land to build something lasting. "Thank you, sir. The Territory appreciates citizens who take seriously their obligations to community development," Hayes said. "We wish you both every success." As the official walked away, Catherine slipped her hand into Samuel's elbow. "Well, Mr. Garrett," she said quietly, "it seems we're landowners now." "We are, indeed, Mrs. Garrett." They walked together towards Samuel's wagon, where their few possessions lay secured under canvas. Catherine's trunk was lost forever, but Mrs. Carver had contributed linens, and the ladies of Bent Creek had gathered enough household goods to stock a modest kitchen. "Samuel," Catherine said as he helped her onto the wagon seat, "there's something you should know about that bank draft." "Oh?" "I visited Mr. Peterson at the Pueblo Bank yesterday. The draft is still good. The signature and account number are clear enough to honor." Samuel looked at her sharply. "You went to Pueblo alone?" "I borrowed Mrs. Carver's buggy. I wanted to settle matters with my father's money before the wedding." Catherine reached into her reticule and pulled out a leather folder. $200 credited to our joint account. "Our account? Equal partners, remember?" Catherine smiled. "I took the liberty of establishing it in both our names." Samuel shook his head, torn between admiration and exasperation. "You're going to be trouble, aren't you?" "I certainly hope so." As they drove away from Bent Creek, the sun setting behind them cast long shadows across the prairie. Samuel thought about the morning 4 days ago when he'd counted fence posts and found one leaning. Now everything had changed: his name, his prospects, his future. The tobacco pouch sat heavy in his vest pocket, but for the first time in years it didn't feel like a burden. "Samuel," Catherine said as they approached the turnoff to his land, their land, "what made you throw that rope?" He considered the question, watching his mare's ears flick at the evening sounds. "I don't know," he said finally. "Maybe because someone needed help, and I was the only one there to give it. And now? Now I think maybe we can help each other." Catherine squeezed his arm. "I think maybe we can." The cabin looked different when they reached it. Not because anything had changed, but because it was no longer a place where one person lived alone. It was a home where two people would learn to build a life together. Samuel helped Catherine down from the wagon and carried her bundle to the door. Inside, the fire he'd banked that morning still glowed in the grate. Catherine moved around the main room, touching the table, the chairs, the shelves of ledgers, learning the shape of her new world. "It's a good cabin," she said. "Solid. My grandfather built it. He said a house should outlast the man who makes it." Catherine nodded, then walked to the mantel where the tobacco pouch still sat next to Samuel's railroad watch. "What will you keep in here now?" she asked. Samuel considered. The deed to their expanded land lay in the envelope from Commissioner Hayes. Catherine's father's letter had served its purpose. His mother's wedding ring now encircled Catherine's finger. "I don't know," he said. "Maybe nothing. Maybe it's time to let it rest." Catherine picked up the pouch, feeling its worn leather, the careful stitching along the seams. "Or maybe," she said, "we'll find new things worth keeping." Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows and setting the cottonwoods to whispering. But inside the cabin, Samuel and Catherine Garrett sat beside their fire, planning the work that would turn their 320 acres into something worth passing on to the next generation. The tobacco pouch sat empty on the table between them, ready for whatever treasures their partnership might bring. If something in this story touched you, linger with us. We'll handle the rest.